I didn't shout at the HOA meeting. I let their own recording do it for me. They demolished my lake house over HOA fees I never owed. When I came home, there was nothing left but dust and my wife's piano buried in rubble. What they didn't know was that I owned the very road they were standing on. I didn't need to yell, I just opened my file, and their whole neighborhood came crashing down. Sunrise slid across the Texas hill country, laying a soft lane of light on the lake. The water was a quiet mirror until a diesel cough shattered it. I rounded the last bend of my gravel lane in the old RV and watched a steel ball bow my house. The wrecking ball hit the east wall with a thump I felt in my ribs. Cedar posts snapped. Dust rose in pale sheets that smelled like chalk and hot hydraulic oil. The big picture window, set to frame mornings just like this, shivered, then surrendered its glass. The lake took the sound and thinned it. I killed the engine and stepped into a haze of powder and diesel. Where my living room had been, an excavator idled on its tracks like a yellow animal, the bucket draped over a hill of broken joists. My porch was only ribs and nails. The cast-iron farm sink I'd salvaged from a diner lay twisted, white enamel crazed into a spider web. Then I saw the piano. It was half buried in roofing and wire. Dark mahogany split through the lid, keys spilled into the dust like lost teeth. My wife's hands had warmed those keys each evening. Shenandoah used to float across the cove until the swallows settled. Now there was only grit and the soft ticking of cooling steel. A man in a spotless hard hat and orange vest walked up, clipboard turned sideways like a shield. He had that busy, empty look of someone trained not to see the thing he's breaking. "Sir, you can't be here," he said. "Active demo. Liability." "This is my home," I said. "Who authorized this?" He flipped pages without reading them. Notices were posted, certified letters, failure to pay HOA dues. Final order executed this morning. "HOA dues," I said. "I'm not in your HOA." He finally met my eyes, offered a shrug that didn't reach anywhere near his conscience, and held up a photocopy. "You are now." The county permit was familiar. The boxes, the seal, the signature bar. On the bottom line, my name sat in perfect electronic strokes, Jack Morrison. It looked exactly like the day I signed a roofing permit on a kiosk after a hailstorm. Too exact. Like someone had copied a signature rather than earned it. The excavator nudged the pile. My cedar dining table, planed smooth on summer nights, went in whole and came out splinters. I took a step and the foreman mirrored me. "Don't," he warned. "We're on schedule." "What schedule?" Wind pushed dust lakeward in gray ribbons. He tapped the page. "Heron Creek Estates HOA. Vote to annex your parcel for aesthetic cohesion. Lien for unpaid assessments. You were noticed." He checked his watch. "East wall, then slab. Truck at 9. 6 weeks. I'd been gone 6 weeks to see my daughter and her boys. Paper maps still sat folded on the RV counter. I had called from gas stations with bells on the hose just to say I'd be home in time for the fall light. "The lake wakes up best at home," I told them. I hadn't imagined home would be missing when I got here. "What board voted to annex my land?" I asked. "Show me the stake where your covenant crosses my line." "Sir, we just performed the order," he said. "You want the association president." He checked his sheet. Bethany Whitfield. The name fit the morning, expensive and over-applied. Behind us, the ball kissed the last standing wall. Nails shrieked. Sunlight poured through and caught a brass glint, the small hinge from the piano bench lid catching dawn like a wink. I walked past him, boots crunching drywall. Cedar pitch bled sweet from a snapped beam. An HOA newsletter stuck to a joist by damp dust grinned up at me. Identical smiles around identical pools. Not a lake in sight. I peeled it free and let it fall. "You were told," the foreman said, not unkindly. "Mail gets missed." "My mail doesn't," I said. And even if it did, my parcel isn't under your bylaws." Saying it out loud felt like setting a post. He gestured toward the new subdivision where roofs sat in rows like pressed hats. Things change. The breeze laid cat's paws across the cove. Beneath the skin, the water kept its old cold. Springs don't forget. My wife always said the land keeps better books than people. "Shut it down," I told him. "Can't do that," he said. "Order stands. You interfere, I call it in." He waited for shouting. I didn't oblige. 30 years walking into burning rooms teaches you to save your air. I folded the photocopy twice and slid it into my back pocket. The paper crackled like dry grass. A mourning dove called, hollow and steady. "Who gave you the right?" I asked. Not to the man, not really, but to whatever committee decided a house built by patience could be unbuilt for a prettier line on a brochure. He had no answer. A water truck rolled in and hosed the pile, tamping dust to mud. I knelt by the piano, brushed grit from the cracked lid, and pinched the warm brass hinge between finger and thumb. It wasn't much. It was proof something had been here that deserved care. Down by the lane, the mailbox flag sat down, the box stuffed full enough to warp the cheap aluminum. A sleeved, certified letter hung out like a tongue. I walked the Kalish road, stones popping under my boots, the foreman's "Sir" thinning behind me. When I swung the door, glossy envelopes slid forward. Assessments, minutes, a newsletter with an embossed logo. One page used my name without my life. Another carried a neat red circle around a line that read, "Annex parcel for community aesthetic cohesion." I let the hinge bite my palm. The lake breeze lifted the edges of the pages. Far off, a kid's bicycle bell rang from the new streets and went quiet, like a joke that lost its audience. I closed the box and looked back up the drive at the yellow machine, eating the last clean angles of the home I had built with 2 hands and 1 promise. The disbelief cooled into something narrow and bright. I turned toward the RV. The hinge rode my lifeline. Diesel idled. A scrap of my wife's ribbon, kept in the glove box since the summer the bluegills ran, had somehow worked itself onto the gravel by the front tire. I picked it up, tied it to the hinge, and slipped both into my pocket with the permit copy. Paper and metal, memory and proof. I faced the road again, the one they drove in on thinking it belonged to them, and spoke just to hear the words out in air that wasn't afraid of them. "They said I owed HOA fees," I said, "for a neighborhood I never joined." The wind carried it across the lake, soft and steady, until it scattered against the far bank. I stood there a long while, until the hum of the excavator faded into the drone of cicadas. Then I turned and walked back toward the RV, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness. 6 weeks earlier, that same road had been the start of a good day. I'd left before sunrise for the long drive to Amarillo, the headlights carving tunnels through mist rising off the lake. My daughter, Katie, had been calling for months. She wanted me to see the new house, to meet the neighbors, to watch her boys fish the stock pond behind the school. I remember closing the gate that morning and glancing back at the house. The cedar siding glowing gold in the first light, smoke curling from the chimney. It looked solid, permanent. Before I left, I'd walked the property line like I always did. 12 acres hugging the lake's southern edge, each corner marked by the same iron stakes I'd driven with my wife 30 years ago. We'd measured it ourselves with a borrowed surveyor's chain, laughing whenever the tape snagged on mesquite. When we finally set the last stake, she painted the tips bright red so you could spot them from 100 yards. "These will outlive us," she'd said. I'd believed her. Back then there was nothing but open pasture and scrub oak around us. The land sloped gentle toward the water, and the only lights after dark came from the stars. Then came the signs, future site of Heron Creek Estates. I'd watched the bulldozers roll in, flattening hills that had never hurt anyone. laying out roads named after trees that never grew there. Birch Run, Maple Circle, Willow Way. The developer, Preston Hale, stopped by one afternoon, drove a white truck polished like a sermon, and stepped out in snakeskin boots that had never seen mud. "Mr. Morrison," he'd said, all smiles, "you've got the best view on this lake. I'd love to make you an offer." I told him it wasn't for sale. He came back twice more, each time with a higher number. When that failed, he brought paperwork instead of money, plats, maps, lines redrawn to make my lakefront look like an afterthought in his design. I called my lawyer, and together we carved my 12 acres clear out of the new development. We filed it, stamped it, and made sure the county clerk's map had a neat white gap between my land and theirs. I kept the official survey folded in the top drawer of my desk, next to the title deed and my wife's wedding ring. That was 10 years ago. Now, standing in the same dirt, I realized those iron stakes were gone. Buried, stolen, or paved over. I couldn't tell. The new asphalt road from Heron Creek ran straight to my gate, like it had always been theirs. The pretty stone entrance they built boasted a bronze plaque that read, "Private Community, Residents Only." It faced my drive as if to taunt me. I pulled open the mailbox again, digging through the pile of glossy envelopes until I found one from Heron Creek Estates. Inside was a certified letter dated a month back. The words were polite, legal, and wrong all at once. Notice of assessment lien, non-payment of dues. It even had my parcel number, my real one. Someone had done their homework. I drove into town the next morning. The county seat sat 40 miles west, a square of brick buildings around a clock tower that hadn't kept proper time since the 70s. I parked by the clerk's office, stepped inside, and smelled the familiar mix of paper, toner, and air conditioning that barely worked. Behind the counter sat Ray Delgado, a retired clerk who'd stayed on part-time to help the new hires. He looked up, squinting through half glasses. "Jake Morrison," he said. "Haven't seen you since your wife brought those peach pies for the Veterans Drive." "Ray," I said, setting the envelope on the counter. "Tell me something. Did this office approve a demolition permit for my parcel?" He raised a brow, took the paper, and disappeared into the back. I waited while the ceiling fan clicked slow circles overhead. After a while, I heard the sound of keys tapping, then silence. Ray came back with a puzzled look. "There's a record, all right," he said. "Filed under Heron Creek HOA, authorized by owner signature." He flipped the screen so I could see it. My name glowed at the bottom, neat and flawless. "That your autograph?" "It's my name," I said, "not my signature." He leaned closer. "File shows modification. 2:07 a.m. from a home IP. That's unusual." I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. "Whose home?" Ray hesitated. "It's not supposed to be visible, but..." He clicked another tab, frowned, and then sighed. "User registered to a B. Whitfield. Ring any bells?" It rang plenty. Bethany Whitfield, HOA president, self-appointed queen of Heron Creek, the one who'd been preaching about community standards ever since her husband's real estate firm went under. She'd wanted my shoreline since the day her model home brochures needed a lake view. I thanked Ray and asked for a certified copy of the permit and metadata. He printed it, stamped it, and slid it across the counter. "Jake," he said quietly, "I don't know what's going on out there, but if Bethany's mixed the county into it, you'd better have your paperwork tight." "I always do," I told him. Driving back, the air felt heavier. Storm clouds were pulling over the hills, low and gray. The wind smelled like wet clay. When I reached the turnoff to my road, the sign that once read Private Drive, Morrison Property, was gone. In its place, a shiny green one read Heron Creek Lane. They hadn't just taken my house. They'd erased my name from the map. I parked by the gate and walked to the edge of the lake. The water was rising, the surface wrinkled by wind, light trembling on it like glass about to break. Somewhere beneath that surface were the reflections of everything we'd built. The deck, the dock, the laughter that used to echo off the water at sunset. I picked up a flat stone and skipped it once, twice, 3 times. It sank clean. "This isn't over," I told the lake, though it wasn't the lake I was talking to. The storm answered with a single roll of thunder, deep and sure. Tomorrow I'd start pulling every record, every plat, every inch of paper that proved what the land already knew. The line we drew in this dirt still existed. It just needed to be uncovered. Tomorrow came early, gray light pressing against the windows of the RV. The storm had passed overnight, leaving the air clean but heavy with that clay scent that clings to Texas mornings. Coffee steamed in my hand while the printer hummed, spitting out every deed, plat, and permit I had stored over the years. The little table was covered in paper, proof of a life built honestly, the sort of proof people like Bethany Whitfield never thought a man like me kept. By 8 o'clock, I was back at the county office, the tires of the RV still wet from puddles along the farm road. Ray Delgado met me at the door, a cup of gas station coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. "Couldn't sleep," he said. Something about that permit kept chewing at me. He handed me the folder. Inside was a printed copy of the demolition authorization, signed, supposedly, by me. My name was perfect, each curve and flourish identical to the digital pad signature from the roofing permit 8 years ago. Ray pointed with his pen. "See that? Same vector pattern. No pressure variance. Someone copied it pixel by pixel." I stared at the page. "Where'd you find the original roofing permit?" "Archives," he said. "Pulled from the backup drive. Whoever forged this didn't expect anyone to look that deep." A low hum filled my ears. Anger does that to you. It tightens the world until all you hear is your pulse. "Bethany forged my signature using county files," I said quietly. Ray nodded. "It's likely. Her HOA has a clerk's access account. They file neighborhood code enforcement requests, maintenance bonds, that sort of thing. Looks like someone used those credentials after hours." I took a slow breath. After hours meaning 2 in the morning. He frowned. "You're gonna need more than speculation, Jake. But I'll tell you what. If you file a request for metadata verification, the county's IT manager will have to release the log officially. I'll handle it." By noon, I was sitting in the county's computer office, watching a young technician named Avery type faster than I could think. Lines of code scrolled across her monitor, each timestamp another piece of truth. She stopped, frowned, and enlarged one line. "Here," she said. "Original file created 4:42 p.m., county office. Modified 2:07 a.m., remote login from an IP associated with Heron Creek HOA admin account." She looked at me, uncertain. "That's not normal." I smiled, though there was no humor in it. "No, ma'am, but it's exactly what I needed." She printed the log, stamped it, and handed it over. The sound of that printer felt like the first crack of dawn after a long night. When I walked out, the sun was high, heat already pulling moisture off the asphalt. Across the street sat a diner with a sign that still boasted best pecan pie in the county. I slid into a booth and ordered coffee, spreading the documents across the table, pages, fluttered under the air conditioner's breath. The forged permit, the metadata, the HOA notice, the demolition order. It was all there. A puzzle that spelled one thing: fraud. While I read, a shadow fell across the table. "You mind if I sit?" It was Sheriff McKay, tall, silver-haired, hat tucked under his arm. He'd known me for 30 years. Every fire, every search, every flood. "Heard about your place," he said, voice low. That's hell, Jake. Worse than hell, I said. Hell's honest about what it is. He studied the papers, tapping one with a calloused finger. You planning to handle this yourself? For now. Careful, he warned. Bethany's got friends on the county board. Folks like to keep things pretty around that lake. Sometimes they forget laws were written before bylaws. I nodded. I'm not looking for trouble, Mac. Just proof. He looked at me, half smiling. You always were a man who liked proof. When you find enough of it, give me a call before you start any fires. Not my kind of fire, I said. He left a 20 on the counter and walked out. The bell over the door jingled, the kind of sound that means everything's normal when you know it isn't. That afternoon, I drove back toward the lake. The subdivision gleamed in the distance, roofs aligned like obedient soldiers. Halfway down the road, a truck blocked the way, a black pickup with the Heron Creek HOA logo on the door. Bethany stepped out, sunglasses catching the sun. She looked like someone dressed for a magazine shoot, not a confrontation. White blazer, perfect hair, calm arrogance. Mr. Morrison, she said sweetly, you can't park that RV on community property. This isn't community property, I said. Her smile thinned. It is now. We annexed your parcel 6 months ago. I've read your vote, I said. Cute language, aesthetic cohesion. But the county records don't agree. My land was never part of your development. You can't rewrite geography. Everything's paperwork, Jake, she said, and paperwork can be corrected. I bet you're good at that. She blinked but didn't answer. You're trespassing on our main road. I'll have to call security. You mean the road you drive on every day to get to your houses? I said, stepping closer. Funny thing, I pulled the title this morning. That road's on my deed. Always has been. You've been trespassing for years. The wind caught her hair, and for the first time I saw a flicker of uncertainty. It vanished as quickly as it came. You won't win this, she said. You're one man. I looked out at the lake, the sunlight glinting like polished steel. That's all it ever takes. She turned sharply, heels striking the pavement, and climbed back into her truck. Gravel spun as she drove off, leaving a thin cloud of dust that settled over my boots. I stood there for a while, the chanson, papers warm in my hand, the hum of crickets starting up again. The world looked the same, but something beneath the surface had shifted, like the moment before water breaks through a dam. The permit in my pocket felt heavy, not with guilt, but with leverage. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd start putting every piece together. Forge, vote, annexation, brick by brick. And when the time came to strike, I'd do it the way I'd always done everything, by the book. Morning came sharp and dry. A thin fog still hovered over the lake, and the sun caught the steam curling off it like smoke rising from the earth itself. The house was gone now. What was left of it looked smaller than I remembered. Just a patch of concrete bones surrounded by weeds and mud. The air was so still I could hear the creak of the gate hinge half a mile up the road. I pulled a chair from the RV, set it in the dirt, and started sorting through the stack of documents spread across the folding table. Permits, county plats, HOA minutes, inspection reports. Each page had a story, but together they told the same lie. Someone had wanted my property folded neatly into Heron Creek's brochure version of paradise, and they didn't care what they had to break to do it. By mid-morning, I knew what I needed next. Someone who could tell a foundation's truth better than a courtroom could. That meant calling Stitch Walker. He picked up on the second ring, his voice still gravelly after all these years. You sound like a man standing in ashes, he said. That's about right, I told him. I've got a mess and need eyes that see through concrete. I'll bring the drone, he said, and hung up. 2 hours later, his old Ford rolled up, blue paint sun-faded and fender held by wire. He climbed out slower than he used to, one knee stiff from Vietnam, but his eyes were the same, clear, sharp, unblinking. He took one long look at the rubble before he spoke. "You didn't lose a house," he said quietly. "You lost a crime scene." We worked in silence at first. Stitch unpacked his drone, checked the rotors, and sent it up humming into the sky. The screen on his controller showed my land from above, gray slab in the middle, ringed by brown scars where equipment had dragged and dug. "No sign of structural failure," he muttered. "Foundations still level, slabs intact. If it had been condemned, there'd be visible heaving, cracks like lightning. This looks deliberate." He circled the drone lower, snapping photos as it hovered. The image feed was sharp enough to see the nail heads glinting in the debris. "Print these in high res," he said. "Exhibit A." I smiled. "You haven't changed much, Stitch." "Neither have crooks," he said. "They just got better printers." We moved through what used to be rooms. He pointed with his cane at a section of rebar sticking out from the concrete. "Still straight," he said. "If this place had shifted, that steel would have bowed. They'll say it was unsafe. They'll be lying." As he spoke, the sky darkened a little, the kind of afternoon shadow that doesn't mean rain, just thought. I could almost hear the echo of my wife's piano under it. Stitch walked back to the truck and spread my blueprints across the tailgate. He traced a finger along the beams. "Half-inch rebar, 12 inches on center," he murmured. "Hurricane ties every rafter. You overbuilt this, Jake. That's why it stood for 20 years. He looked up. "You got any paperwork on an inspection report they might have filed?" I pulled out the copy Ray had printed for me. It was thin, a single sheet claiming foundation settling and truss instability. At the bottom was the signature of a licensed inspector named William Johnson, except I'd known Bill Johnson for years. The man couldn't spell his own name wrong, and here it was signed Johnson instead of Johnson. Stitch caught it before I spoke. "Wrong spelling," he said. "They forged this too." "Bethany's fingerprints are all over it," I said. "They didn't think anyone would check." He nodded, folding the paper carefully. "Get me his real signature for comparison. The state licensing board will confirm the discrepancy. You do that, and we'll have proof they falsified a state inspection." We spent the rest of the day cataloging, labeling every fragment like archaeologists at a dig site. By sundown, my once beautiful lot looked like evidence laid out for judgment. That evening, we sat on the truck tailgate eating cold sandwiches while the light went soft and gold over the lake. "You know, Jake," Stitch said after a while, "I've seen houses burn, blow over, wash away, but I've never seen one murdered." I looked at the water. "Then it's about time we solved one." He chuckled, but it was tired laughter, the kind that comes from men who've seen too many things break. "You'll need a lawyer, someone who speaks the language of paper better than they do." "I already have a name," I said. "Sarah Coleman, water rights attorney out of Austin. She knows land law better than most folks know their own prayers." "Good," he said, stretching his leg, "because you're not just fighting an HOA. You're fighting the idea that land belongs to whoever yells the loudest." When he left, night had fallen. The RV's generator hummed soft as I sat at the little table, reviewing the photos Stitch had emailed. Every line, every shadow was evidence. Outside, the moon rose over the lake, silver and steady, reflecting off the twisted metal of what used to be my roof. Somewhere out on the road, a car slowed, headlights sweeping across the site before disappearing up toward the subdivision. Maybe just a curious neighbor, or maybe someone making sure the fire they started was still burning. I shut off the lights and sat in the dark, listening to the water lap against the bank. Tomorrow I'd drive to Austin. Sarah would know what to do with the kind of proof we had now, and when the time came, We'd make them answer for every splinter. The generator ticked itself quiet. I opened a window and let the lake breeze in, cool, carrying the faint sweetness of mesquite and the distant hum of crickets. Somewhere out on the new subdivision road, a car door closed, then another. I waited until the sound faded before I let myself breathe. Whoever it was had no business here at this hour. Sleep didn't come. Grief never knocks before it enters. Around midnight, I plugged in an old flash drive I'd kept tucked inside my wife's jewelry box. She used to record her piano sessions on it, saving the music she loved most. I pressed play. The speakers crackled, then filled the RV with her voice humming under the notes. It wasn't much, but it steadied me. She'd always said, "When you build something right, it'll hold through every storm." I whispered back, "Even this one?" At dawn, I packed the evidence box, photos, blueprints, the forged permit, the inspection report with its misspelled signature. Before pulling away, I walked down to the edge of the foundation. The concrete was still damp with dew, a thin mirror of the gray morning. I touched it like a gravestone. The drive to Austin took 3 hours. The highway stretched flat and endless, the kind of road that gives a man time to think and too much space to remember. By the time I reached the city limits, the sky had turned from pale silver to hard blue. Sarah Coleman's office sat above a feed store on the south side. She greeted me at the door with a handshake and a raised eyebrow. "You look like a man bringing trouble," she said. "Trouble brought itself," I answered. Her office smelled of paper, lemon cleaner, and faint coffee. She motioned for me to sit, then unfolded the blueprints on her desk, scanning with quick eyes. "You kept every record. That's good. Developers hate men with memory." She studied the demolition permit, tracing the signature with her pen. "That's a digital copy, right? Forged from a roofing permit 8 years ago." She nodded slowly. "Metadata confirms it?" "Yes. Timestamp shows a 2:07 a.m. edit from Heron Creek's HOA admin login." "That's felony forgery and misuse of county access," she said. "You've got them nailed, Jake." "I want more than charges," I said. "I want my land clean. No liens, no claims, no ghosts." She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Then we start with the paper they worship. Title, easements, boundaries. The law gives them enough rope. We'll just show them where they tied the knot." For the next hour, we built a case the way masons build a wall, layer by layer. She called the county clerk, the licensing board for structural inspectors, even a friend in the state attorney's office. Each piece confirmed the same story. Bethany and her developer ally had forged, voted, and filed their way into theft. When she hung up the last call, Sarah leaned back. "This isn't just about your house, Jake. If they've done this once, they've probably done it to others, falsifying annexations, inventing liens, coercing sales." Her words settled like a weight. I thought of the old couple who lived on the North Shore, how they'd sold their cabin after a series of HOA fines for a non-compliant dock. I'd helped them move that summer, wondering how paperwork could scare good people off their land. Now I knew. "Can we stop them?" I asked. "We can expose them," she said. "And when we do, it won't just be civil. It'll be criminal." I left Austin with the wind at my back and a plan that felt like breathing again. The late afternoon sun turned the asphalt into a ribbon of gold. As I neared home, thunderheads were building in the west, their bellies dark with rain. Half a mile from my gate, I noticed tire tracks cutting fresh through the mud near my property line. I slowed the truck and killed the engine. The air was thick, quiet, except for the hum of locusts. Then I saw it, a black pickup parked half hidden by the trees. No markings this time. I stepped out slowly, letting the door close without a sound. The truck's engine was still warm. On the passenger seat lay a clipboard and a map with my parcel circled in red ink. I snapped a photo with my phone, then stepped back. Something metallic glinted near the rear tire. A small silver device no bigger than a key fob. A tracker. Whoever was watching me wasn't done. I drove straight to the sheriff's office in town. McKay met me at the door, eyebrows climbing when he saw the mud on my boots. I dropped the tracker and the photo on his desk. "Found that near my gate," I said. He turned the device over. "Looks like GPS, probably how they kept tabs on you while they were working the annexation." "Legal?" I asked. "Not without consent. I'll log it." He slipped it into an evidence bag, sealing it tight. "Jake," he said, "you're stirring a hornet's nest. You sure you want to see this through?" "Can't unburn a house," I said. "Might as well roast the nest." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the first hint of rain. I climbed back into the truck and watched the clouds roll in over the lake. Somewhere in the dark, a whistle cut through the wind, low, distant, and hollow. It could have been the wind through the pines, or it could have been something else. Either way, it told me the same thing. They knew I wasn't done. That night, thunder rattled the valley, and the first drops hit the tin roof like stones. I sat by the window with Sarah's voice still echoing in my mind. "Expose them, and the law will do the rest." For the first time since the walls fell, I believed her. Morning broke cool and washed clean, the air still humming from last night's storm. The smell of wet cedar drifted in through the cracked window. The lake had risen half an inch, spreading over the lowest stones like a sheet of glass. I poured a cup of coffee and watched mist lift from the water. For the first time in weeks, I felt purpose instead of rage. Sarah called just after sunrise. "Their HOA meeting's scheduled for tonight," she said. 7 o'clock, open session. "I know that clubhouse," I said. "Windowless, beige walls, smells like disinfectant and ego." She laughed softly. "Then you'll feel right at home. Bring everything we've built. You don't need to yell. Let the truth do the talking." By noon, I was printing out packets, neat, labeled, professional. Each one contained the forged demolition permit with the metadata log, the fake inspection report with the misspelled name, the drone photos of the intact foundation, and the county map showing my parcel as separate from their development. 20 copies, each stapled at the corner, each ready to cut through the fog of lies. Before I left, I added one more item to my jacket pocket, a small digital recorder. I checked the battery twice. The road into Heron Creek was slick with puddles, the sun glinting off them like scattered mirrors. As I passed the polished entry sign, "Welcome to Heron Creek Estates," I caught sight of a security guard leaning against his SUV, arms crossed, watching me. He didn't wave. I didn't either. The clubhouse sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, its windows high and narrow, designed more to keep things in than let light out. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. About 15 residents milled around, murmuring, holding clipboards. At the front, behind a folding table draped in a maroon cloth, sat Bethany Whitfield. Her hair was perfect again, but there were dark circles under her eyes. Maybe the mirror had finally started telling her the truth. The meeting started with the usual nonsense: landscaping contracts, paint color approvals, a neighbor's request for a different mailbox design. Every rule sounded smaller than the last. Then Bethany cleared her throat and looked over the crowd. "Before we move to new business," she said, her voice sweet as syrup, "I'd like to remind everyone that community standards are not optional. We've had incidents of non-compliance near the lake property." That was my cue. I stood from the back row. "You mean my property?" I said. Every head turned. Bethany blinked, her smile frozen. "Mr. Morrison," she said, the sweetness hardening. "This is a private meeting for members of the Heron Creek Homeowners Association. I believe your membership status was resolved." "I'm not here as a member," I said, walking forward. "I'm here as the owner of the land your association illegally annexed and demolished." A low murmur rippled through the room. I reached the front table and set my stack of folders down. "You'll want to look at these." I began handing them out, one to each board member, then to the residents. The sound of paper flipping filled the silence. "These are certified copies of county records," I said. "You'll see on page 1 the original plat map showing my 12 acres outside Heron Creek jurisdiction. Page 2, your demolition permit, forged with a copied digital signature from a 2014 roofing repair. Page 3, the inspection report you filed under a man's name spelled wrong. And page 4, an image log showing your HOA admin login accessing county systems at 2:07 a.m. Bethany's face went pale beneath the makeup. She tried to speak, but her voice came out thin. "This is highly irregular. These documents they're public record," I said. "Anyone can verify them, and I suggest you do." The residents whispered louder now, shuffling through pages. One of them, a gray-haired man in a polo shirt, looked up. "Is this true?" he asked. "You forged his signature?" Bethany's eyes flashed. "Absolutely not. This is all misinterpretation, taken out of context." "Then explain it," I said. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. I pulled the recorder from my pocket and set it gently on the table. "But you don't have to take my word for it." A click, and then her own voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "If he won't sell, we'll force a compliance lien," she said in the recording, her tone crisp and confident. "We'll make it make sense." The words hung in the stale air. Someone in the back gasped. A woman dropped her pen. The gray-haired man pushed back his chair and stood. "You said this was about property values, Bethany," he said. "Not taking people's homes." Bethany rose from her seat, face red now. "This is an invasion of privacy," she shouted. "That recording is inadmissible." I met her gaze and spoke quietly. "That's fine. I'm not here for court." I let the words hang for half a beat. "I'm here for title." Silence. The kind that changes a room. I opened my final folder and slid a copy toward her. 2 decades ago, after the original developer went bankrupt, I purchased the roadbeds, utility easements, and mineral rights under this subdivision. Every street you drive on, every pipe that carries your water, it all runs through land I own. Your HOA doesn't hold title. I do." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The lawyer seated beside her went pale. "That's impossible," he said weakly. "No," I said. "It's recorded. County Record 2005-3189 filed March 10th. As of this morning, I've submitted a termination of easements for cause. Your association no longer has legal access to those roads or utilities." The room erupted, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, panic spreading like a spark in dry grass. I stepped back from the table. "You built your paradise on my ground," I said, voice steady. "Now the ground is reminding you who it belongs to." Bethany tried to regain control, banging a gavel against the table. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted. But no one listened. Papers scattered, whispers turned to anger. I walked toward the door as her voice cracked behind me. Outside, the sky was turning amber, the air cooling against my face. The wind carried the first calm breath I'd felt since the wrecking ball hit. Behind me, through the glass, I saw Bethany staring down at the documents spread before her like a deck of losing cards. For once, she didn't look like the woman in charge. She looked like someone who finally understood the weight of a lie. I walked out into the cooling dusk, the sound of the HOA meeting still buzzing behind me like a dying hornet. The air smelled of cut grass and wet asphalt. that strange mix of calm and aftermath. I could still hear voices inside, residents arguing, demanding answers, the scrape of chairs against tile. It didn't matter. I'd said what needed saying. The truth was loose now, and once it's out, it doesn't crawl back in. Sarah called as I reached the truck. "Well?" she asked. "They heard it," I said. "All of it. The forged permits, the recording, the easements. And Bethany tried to fight it," I said. Then I told her I wasn't going to court. I was going to title. There was silence on the line, then the sound of her exhaling. "That'll stick," she said. "People remember words like that." By the time I pulled back into my drive, the lake was turning violet under the falling light. Frogs were starting up along the bank, and the gate creaked in the breeze like it was laughing under its breath. I parked near the foundation, climbed out, and stood where my front door used to be. The night felt still, too still. Across the water I could see porch lights flicking on one by one in the subdivision. The people over there didn't know it yet, but the ground under their roads, their lawns, their mailboxes, it was all mine again. Not out of vengeance, but out of simple truth. I heard a truck engine start up on the far side of the lake. Its headlights swept once across the water, then vanished behind the hill. Probably Bethany heading home to figure out her next move. I imagined her sitting at that spotless kitchen island of hers, surrounded by rules and bylaws that suddenly didn't mean a thing. The next morning, I met Sarah and Sheriff McKay at the county records office. The old courthouse was cool inside, sunlight falling through stained glass that made the dust glow. Ray Delgado was waiting for us, smiling like a man who'd just finished reading a good mystery and already knew the ending. "You'll want to see this," he said, waving us to his desk. He opened the thick county ledger, pages yellowed and soft. "Here, recorded 2005, Book 3189, Entry 42, transfer of easements, utilities, and mineral rights from Thompson Development to Jacob Morrison." He ran a finger down the line to where the county seal was stamped in red. Sarah leaned over my shoulder. "That's it," she said quietly. "That's your backbone. The entire community's built on property you control." "Control's a funny word," I said. "I just never gave it away." McKay whistled under his breath. "You realize what this means? Every water line, every sewer access, every road, technically private." "Technically," I said, "and now legally. They breached the agreement when they destroyed my home. The easements terminated." Sarah smiled, half in disbelief. "You've got them cornered without ever raising your voice." "I learned that from fires," I said. "You don't yell at flames, you starve them." By mid-afternoon, the paperwork was filed. Copies went to the county, to Sarah's office, and one to my pocket, just in case someone needed reminding later. As we left, thunder rolled again somewhere over the hills, soft but steady. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I drove to the main entrance of Heron Creek Estates. The decorative gate gleamed, still wet from the rain. Beyond it, a row of manicured lawns and perfect porches sat in silence. I stepped out, unfolded the county map, and found the little cross-hatched strip labeled Private Road, Morrison Title. My road. The security guard from earlier appeared from his SUV, brow furrowed. "Sir, this is a restricted—" I held up the document before he could finish. "Not anymore. As of this morning, the easement's been revoked. This road's private property under my title." He blinked, reading the seal at the top. I don't understand." "You don't have to," I said. "Just tell your employers to stop driving on it without permission." He nodded slowly and retreated. I walked back to my truck, slid behind the wheel, and watched the sun sink behind the lake. The sky went from gold to copper, then to the color of old pennies. In that fading light, The gate's metal frame looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile, even. Maybe power always looks that way when you take away the paper holding it up. Later that night, I sat by the RV window, lights off, listening to the quiet hum of insects. Then, faintly, I heard another engine. A car eased down the road, stopped at the gate, idled for a moment, then backed away. I didn't need headlights to know who it was. Bethany never did handle silence well. I thought about calling Sarah, about telling her it was done, but something held me back. There was still one more thing to do. Justice wasn't just about proving who was right. It was about showing the rest what right looked like. I reached for my pen and began drafting the notice of closure. Formal, legal, perfectly polite. In 48 hours, I'd install a temporary barrier across the entrance to Heron Creek Lane. Nothing permanent, just enough to make a point. As the clock ticked past midnight, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and lake water through the open window. Somewhere far off, a single owl called. The sound echoed off the empty foundation outside like a promise. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to find the road they thought was theirs behind a locked gate. And for the first time since this all began, I felt peace. Not the quiet that comes after loss, but the kind that comes before justice. The next 2 days passed with a steady rhythm, the kind a man gets used to after years of firefighting, planning, checking, waiting. Dawn brought the smell of rain-soaked cedar and diesel, and by noon the sky had cleared into a pale blue that looked like it had been scrubbed clean. I spent the morning in town, picking up hardware and steel posts from the supply yard. The clerk, a heavy-set man named Tom, recognized me. "Heard about your place, Jake," he said, lowering his voice. "Whole county's talking. They say you own the road now." "Always did," I said. He gave a small, slow smile. "Guess folks are about to remember who paved it." By the time I got back, Stitch was already waiting by the gate, sipping coffee from a thermos and watching the clouds. "You really gonna do it?" he asked. "Temporary," I said, unloading the steel bars from the truck bed. "A lawful closure, just until they realize what they've been driving over." He chuckled. "You were always better at lessons than warnings." Together we sank the first post, the clang of the sledge echoing through the still air. The ground was soft, but steady, the kind of soil that holds memories. We set the second post, ran the chain between them, and hung a simple wooden sign I'd painted the night before. White letters, black background, private road, access revoked by owner. When it was done, we stood back and looked at it. The gate was plain, nothing dramatic, but it carried the weight of everything they'd ignored. Around sunset, a few residents from Heron Creek drove up. Their shiny SUVs rolled to a stop a few feet from the new barrier. Windows down, faces pale, unsure. One of them, a young mother with a baby in the back seat, leaned out. "Mr. Morrison," she called, voice trembling. "How will we get to our homes?" "You've got 48 hours, I said evenly. "After that, access is limited until the HOA resolves its violations. I suggest you talk to your board." Her eyes darted to the gate, then back at me. "But the school bus. There's a county road 2 miles north," I said. "It was open before the HOA closed it off for aesthetic reasons. Maybe now they'll reopen it." She looked ready to argue, then stopped. "I'm sorry about your house," she said quietly, before driving off. When the last car disappeared, the night settled in. Crickets started up along the ditch, their song rising in waves. Across the lake, lights flickered in the houses like restless stars. The silence was thicker now, not empty, but waiting. That silence broke at dawn. I woke to the sound of engines. 2 maintenance trucks idled just beyond the gate, their crews standing around uncertainly. The foreman, a man in a yellow vest with tired eyes, walked up. "We were hired by the HOA," he said. "Landscaping, weekly contract." I pointed to the sign. You'd be trespassing." He looked at the paperwork in his hand, then back at me. "They didn't tell us that." "Then now you know." He sighed, nodded, and turned his trucks around. The engines faded down the hill, leaving the air still once more. By midday, the HOA lawyer had sent an email, formal, full of threats dressed as diplomacy. Sarah read it aloud over the phone. "They're accusing you of obstruction and unlawful restriction of access," she said. "They're bluffing. The easement was conditional, and you terminated it legally." "Let them bluff," which I said. "They built their empire on paperwork. Now they can drown in it." That evening, I walked the perimeter again. The road shimmered in the low light, small puddles reflecting the pink of the setting sun. At the edge of the lake, I stopped where the piano used to sit and listened to the water whispering against the rocks. For the first time in a long while, the place didn't feel like loss. It felt like witness. A breeze came through, cool and steady, carrying the faint smell of jasmine from the subdivision gardens. It was strange, their perfume reaching my land, my air. I smiled at the thought. Just before dark, headlights appeared again. A black sedan rolled to the gate and stopped. Bethany stepped out, her heels sinking slightly into the mud. She stared at the sign, then at me. "You think this makes you right?" she asked, voice sharp. "I don't think," I said. "I know." She folded her arms. "You're isolating innocent families, Jake. People with kids, people who depend on that road." "Those people should have chosen better leaders," I said. "I'm not keeping anyone prisoner. I'm keeping thieves off my land." She stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You'll regret this. When the county realizes what you've done, when they see you've shut down access." I pulled the official notice from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. "They already saw. County clerk signed it. Sheriff's Department delivered copies to your office this morning." Bethany stared at the paper, her eyes scanning for a loophole that wasn't there. The wind tugged at her hair, lifting it like the last flame of a dying match. She crushed the notice in her hand and turned back toward her car. "This isn't over," she said. I watched her drive away, the taillights vanishing into the dark. The night fell heavy again, the gate standing still in her wake. Inside the RV, I poured a drink and sat by the window. The wind had gone quiet, the kind of silence that holds its breath before the next move. I knew Bethany wouldn't give up. People like her never do. They just shift tactics, trading arrogance for desperation. Still, for that one night, peace felt real. The road was mine, the truth was solid, and justice, though still coming, was close enough to taste. I closed my eyes, listening to the hum of crickets and the soft slap of water against the bank. In that moment, silence wasn't an absence. It was ownership. The next morning, the silence broke. Tires crunched on gravel, doors slammed, and when I stepped outside, 2 sheriff's cruisers sat by the gate, red and blue lights pulsing softly in the dawn. A third vehicle, a black SUV, idled behind them. Standing beside it, in her best navy suit and fresh lipstick, was Bethany Whitfield. She pointed at me like a teacher catching a student cheating on a test. The senior deputy, a man I didn't recognize, adjusted his hat as I approached. "Mr. Morrison, ma'am here's filed a complaint. Claims you're obstructing a public roadway and unlawfully detaining residents." "Public road?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "You might want to check the county plat before you use that term." Bethany stepped forward, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "This man's endangering families. Children can't get to school, mail isn't being delivered. He's taken the law into his own hands." I looked at the deputy. "You want to step inside my RV? I'll show you the law I'm taking into my own hands." He hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and paper. I spread the documents across the small dinette table. County maps, deeds, title transfers, easement termination notices, every sheet signed and stamped. "Here's the property record," I said, tapping the page with my finger. "Filed March 10th, 2005. Transfer of title for the roadbeds, utilities, and mineral rights to Jacob Morrison. And this," I slid another page forward, "is the termination of easements recorded last week. Verified by the clerk, acknowledged by the sheriff's office, witnessed by my attorney." The deputy's brow furrowed as he read. The second deputy leaned over his shoulder. For a moment, all you could hear was the faint click of the air conditioner. Bethany's voice came from the doorway, brittle. "He's lying. Those documents, he forged them. He forged everything." The deputy didn't look up. "Ma'am, this paperwork's got county seals and timestamps that predate your subdivision by years." "That can't be right," she said, voice cracking. "The HOA owns this infrastructure. It's in our charter." I turned toward her. "Charters don't override deeds, Bethany. You can make all the rules you want, but you can't make them on someone else's land." The deputy looked between us, then exhaled slowly. "All right, ma'am. You'll need to step back. Mr. Morrison, I see no violation here. You're within your legal rights." Bethany's face turned red. "You don't understand. He's blackmailing the whole neighborhood. He's holding us hostage." "No," I said. "I'm holding a boundary." The deputies exchanged a look, then gathered the paperwork. "We'll file a report and forward it to the district office, but—" The older deputy flipped one of the pages, squinting. "With the forgery evidence you've got here, the fake permit, the metadata, this might go further than county." "Federal?" I asked. He nodded. "Wire fraud, falsification of public records, mail tampering. Those are big words with long consequences." Bethany laughed, but it came out thin. "You can't be serious. You think the FBI is going to care about a little HOA dispute?" The deputy straightened, folding the papers carefully. "Ma'am, they'll care about forged county permits and stolen digital signatures, especially if it involves real estate." She froze, her hand tightening on the SUV door. The deputy stepped aside, talking into his radio. His voice was calm but clipped, professional. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Confirming report of forged documents in the Heron Creek case. Possible federal escalation. Requesting coordination with field office." Bethany's mouth fell open. You can't—" I walked to the doorway and looked at her, my voice quiet. "You demolished my home, forged my name, and trespassed on land you didn't own. You could have stopped this the moment you saw that piano under the rubble. But you didn't." The SUV door slammed. She climbed inside, eyes wild, and barked something at the driver. The vehicle sped off, tires spitting gravel, disappearing up the road toward the subdivision. The deputies gathered their things. "We'll handle it from here, Mr. Morrison," the older one said. "You did right keeping everything documented." When they left, the air felt strangely light. The wind had picked up, rattling the new gate's chain against the steel post. It sounded almost like applause. By mid-afternoon, Sarah called. "They've confirmed the federal investigation," she said. "The Bureau's already requested your files. You'll need to meet with an agent tomorrow for an official statement." "Here? They'll probably want to see the site. Let them. The more they see, the worse it looks for Bethany." That evening, I drove into town for groceries. The gas station clerk gave me a half smile. "Heard the HOA president's in trouble," he said. "FBI trucks at the clubhouse." "Already?" I asked. He nodded. "Pulled up just before sunset. Guess they had a warrant." I bought a cup of coffee, drove to the ridge above the lake, and parked where I could see the whole neighborhood. From there, Heron Creek looked like a diorama, rows of perfect houses lined up under the fading light, all of them built on ground they never truly owned. Down by the clubhouse, blue jackets moved in the amber glow of their headlights. I could just make out the shape of Bethany's SUV, door open, her silhouette framed against the lights. The sound carried faintly across the water, a voice shouting, then the metallic click of handcuffs. The noise echoed once, then was swallowed by distance. I sat there until the lights dimmed and the night took back its quiet. For the first time in months, it felt like the world had righted itself a little, like gravity had shifted back where it belonged. The road lay dark and smooth below, the gate gleaming faintly in the starlight. I watched until every car was gone, then whispered into the night, more to myself than to anyone else. Justice doesn't always roar, I said. Sometimes it just clicks. By morning, the lake was glass again, still and endless, as if the chaos of the past months had been nothing more than a storm passing through. The air was crisp, the kind that smells like cedar and fresh beginnings. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of someone else's shadow pressing on my chest. The headlines came fast. HOA president arrested in forgery scheme. Federal agents raid Heron Creek clubhouse. Landowner wins back rights in historic property case. Reporters tried to reach me for comment, but I didn't need to speak. The papers spoke well enough on their own. 3 weeks later, Sarah drove out to meet me. She stepped from her car with a grin, holding a thick envelope. "Settlements finalized," she said. "Insurance payout, $948,000 and some change, plus penalties." I nodded, taking the envelope but not opening it. "Enough to rebuild?" "More than enough," she said. "But you don't seem like a man who's thinking about money." "I'm thinking about foundations," I said. "The kind that last." The rebuilding started that same week. The crews came early, their trucks rattling down the road that now carried my name again. Morrison Lane. The first concrete pour felt like breathing life back into the ground. This time I built slower, steadier. The new frame rose taller than the last one, with storm anchors sunk twice as deep and a wide ramp at the front door. Stitch's idea. "Future-proof it," he'd said. "Never know who'll need it." He showed up most mornings with his coffee thermos and his cane, giving orders like an old sergeant. "Check the beam spacing," he'd bark. "Don't let 'em rush the curing." The crew respected him instantly. The man had a presence that no degree could buy. At night, when the hammers went quiet, I'd walk down to the lake and watch the reflection of the half-built house ripple on the surface. The smell of sawdust mixed with water and earth, and sometimes, when the wind came just right, I could almost hear my wife's piano again. Across the water, Heron Creek had changed. The grand entrance sign was gone. The HOA dissolved by court order. Residents now met at their mailboxes, forming what they called a neighborhood group. No fines, no rules, just a handshake agreement to keep the roads clean and help one another. Funny how fast people remember decency when power leaves the room. A few of them came by to talk. The Millers, the older couple who'd once been denied a permit for a wheelchair ramp, stood at the edge of my drive one afternoon. "Mr. Morrison," Mr. Miller said, holding his hat in both hands. "We heard what you did. For all of us. Thought we'd bring you something." His wife handed me a pie, still warm. Pecan, my wife's favorite. "Thank you," I said quietly. "And your ramp?" He smiled. "Built it last week. County permit, no trouble. Sarah even sent someone to help." "Good," I said. "You earned that porch." By late summer, the new house stood finished. The cedar shone golden in the light, and the air smelled like varnish and rain. I installed a plaque beside the door, carved simple and plain. Built twice. Stood forever. On the day I moved back in, Sarah and Stitch came over. We stood on the porch with coffee mugs, watching the sun climb over the lake. The surface flashed bright silver, then settled into blue. Birds wheeled above the water, tracing lazy arcs. "Funny thing about justice," Stitch said. "Takes longer than it should, but when it shows up, it brings good weather." Sarah smiled. "So what'll you do now, Jake? Keep the road locked?" I shook my head. "No, we'll open it tomorrow. Not for the HOA, but for the people who learned something from it." That evening, I took one last walk to the gate. The chain was cool against my fingers as I unlatched it. Beyond it, the road wound toward the quiet lights of the neighborhood. I opened the gate wide and left it that way. When I turned back toward the house, the porch light glowed softly, golden on the cedar siding. The lake lapped gently at the shore, patient and eternal. I thought of all that had been taken, all that had been returned. They'd believed power came from rules, meetings, and papers stamped by hands that never touched soil. They were wrong. Power comes from standing on what's yours, from knowing where your lines are drawn and never letting someone else erase them. As the stars came out, their reflections shimmered in the lake. Tiny lights scattered across water that belonged, once again, to me. "They thought power came from papers and meetings," I whispered. "I learned it lives in the ground, and in the truth you're willing to stand on." If you've ever had to fight for what's yours, you know, justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands its ground. Drop the word justice in the comments if you've ever dealt with an HOA or fought for your land. And if stories like this remind you what real ownership feels like, hit subscribe and stay with me for the next one. Out here, every acre has a story worth telling.